Hello everyone, Mr.Gsqrd here, and welcome to this tutorial video on Windows 98 and installing it in a virtual environment. Before we continue to the list of things that you will need in order to do this, and the rest of this introduction, I will direct your attention to the screen where you will see a bunch of timestamps. Those timestamps are the stamps to the steps that we will be doing in order to build this. So if you have everything you need already, or if you're just really interested in learning one of these steps, please feel free to skip ahead in the video at any time. Now, with all that being said, first we need to talk about what you will need in order to do this. Now, this can be done in Linux, Mac OS X, and Windows. So, I'm in a Windows environment right now, as you can now see. However, Linux and Mac this can be done in. You will need the most up-to-date version of VirtualBox, and as of the time of this recording, that version is 5.2.12. So make sure you get that. You will also want the add-ons. If you don't know how to do those things, the VirtualBox website has really good documentation. It lines it out, it helps you out, and if you need anything further, I would recommend just looking for a YouTube video on how to install VirtualBox onto your machine. Now, one other thing that you will need to do. Down in the description below, you will see a link, and that is a download link to my public share on it's the download to Windows 98 itself. It's got the ISO image, it has the key, it has all the software that we will be needing, and it has a little text file that I've written on the steps on how to do this. So please grab that before you begin, follow along on the steps with the video, because the steps were just kind of also my notes to this, so they're not incredibly detailed, but if you know what you're doing, they should be enough to do it. So just feel free to grab that, download it, and do it yourself if you're interested. Now, why are we doing this? The main reason that I wanted to do this is, it's honestly because I wanted to play my old games that don't work very well in Windows 10, that didn't work very well in 7, or 8, or even really XP, to be honest, but they did run in Windows 98. So that was the whole reasoning behind this video and behind this process, was to install this so we can play games. So everything that I'm doing is very gamer focused. If you're doing this for some other reason, these steps are still very applicable, so please feel free to continue watching and use the steps as appropriate. Now, with that being said, we are going to go ahead and begin step 1 to this video, which is setting up the actual virtual machine. Alrighty, so as we just saw, we saw the steps here. Let's get ready and begin. Let's go ahead and hit new, and the first thing we're going to do is name this. We're going to call it Windows 98 SE. One important thing to remember though is later in this particular step, in step 1, in setting this up, the name is important. It will be case sensitive regardless of whether you're on Linux or Windows. So just remember that for later. Let's go ahead and bump our memory size up to 512, and we are going to create a virtual hard disk now. So we're just going to leave this defaults. If you want to move this to wherever you store your virtual machines, go ahead and do that. I'm just going to give it 12 gigs and leave it at the default location because that's where I keep all mine. We're going to say create, and it's going to finish up its whatever it was doing there and pop over here onto our left bar. Now we're going to click the settings while this is highlighted in order to change our system settings. What we are going to do is uncheck the floppy drive. We don't need that for 98. If this was Windows 95 you would, but nothing I need needs the floppy. So I actually uncheck it so I don't get confused and try and pick the wrong thing. If you have floppies that you're trying to use, you're definitely going to want to keep that checked then. Pointing device, we need to change this from PS2 mouse to USB tablet. Our extended features, we want to enable the I/O APIC, and under this processor tab in systems, we want to enable the PAE NX. Next thing we're going to want to modify is the display. We're going to want to increase this video memory up to 64 megs. There we go. We're also going to want to enable the 3D acceleration and enable the 2D video acceleration as well. Next over here on audio, we just want to make sure this says Sound Blaster 16. This should say Sound Blaster for whatever it is you're doing. If it doesn't, choose what you think is most applicable. For me, and I've also helped a couple other of my, some other of my friends, do this process on their own machines. Everyone has said Sound Blaster. Everyone has also been on a Windows environment. I don't know if this will be different for Linux or Mac because I haven't done it in Linux or Mac. But this should say Sound Blaster 16. Now for network. We want to change that to a bridge adapter. Open up the advanced menu and change the adapter type to PCNet-PC2. And say OK. Nope, not OK yet. Sorry, one more step. We got to come down to user interface. And I like to have the show a top of screen box checked. Now we are going to say OK. Going to save those settings for us and close out this little dialog box. Perfect. Exactly what we wanted to do. Now, we do need to run some actual commands. So we are going to open up our command prompt now. If you are on Linux or Mac, you're going to want to open a terminal session. And for me, in particular, these are the commands that I want to run. They are down in the description below. If you are using Linux or Mac, they are also down in the description below. They are a very similar command, however, they are slightly different. So if you're using Linux and Mac, make sure you go down below to check that out. If you're doing this at home, make sure you check the description out as well. I've got them popped up on the screen right now, but they might be hard to read and you also can't copy and paste. So you probably want to do that. Go check the description out. It's also in that text file in the download link that you clicked earlier to download all the stuff necessary to do this. So we're going to run this command and hit enter. What this command does is it enables for Win98 SE, and this is where the case sensitivity matters as well, by the way, if you're using Windows. If I put a lowercase w here, it would have told me, I have no idea what you're talking about, that PC does not exist. But because I typed it in right, it obviously is true. What this does, this enables our mouse over to the virtual machine. The add-ons on VirtualBox do not work with Windows 98, obviously enough. So this command enables the mouse over to work correctly. The next command that we are going to run is this one. And what this command does, because I'm using an AMD processor, this more or less tricks the virtual machine into thinking that I am running an Intel Core i7 processor. It enables it to work. If you do not run this command and you are using an AMD processor, you're going to get blue screens, you're going to get a lot more errors, and the whole thing probably won't even work for you. So make sure you run this command. There are additional CPU types that you can use. Those are also down in the description below, and they're also in the steps text file that comes with the download to this. So that is the last step in the setup. So now we are actually ready to turn on the virtual machine and begin its imaging, which is the next step. Let's check it out. Alright, now that our settings are all done, we've had a little bit of a flash come up with what our next step is. Let's go ahead and do it. First thing we're going to do is start the virtual machine. Hopefully this pops up on our primary window here, as it should. There it is. Now it wants us to pick a startup disk, which is good because that just makes it a little bit easier on our first time boot. Now, from the download, as long as you downloaded what I have provided down in the description, you want to pick the Windows 98 2nd edition.iso and open it and say start. What this is going to do, it's going to boot into the CD, essentially. We're going to want to drop down, say 2, so it actually does boot into the CD and doesn't try and boot into the hard drive. We're going to want to pick option 1, start Windows 98 setup from CD. And hit enter there. It's going to run through its boot process. It's going to come up to that classic bright blue screen that everybody knows and loves with the white text. Ah, so nostalgic. Now, on this screen, you just want to hit enter to continue in order to start the setup process. We're going to want to click enter again to configure the unallocated disk space. And for this, we are going to want to use large disk support. Excuse me. I think we use 12 gigs. 12 gigs is pretty big for Windows 98. So we're going to say, yes, give us large disk. Now what it's going to do, it's going to reboot, and we are going to want to make sure that our boot media, or the 2nd edition ISO, is just left alone. And we're going to want to boot back into the CD. So let's push enter now and do that. There we go. That was really quick. Let's go ahead and say option 2, boot into CD. Leave this on option 1, start the Windows setup. This will run through its boot process yet again, and bring us back to our lovely blue screen with white text. And now it's going to format the C drive. So, while this is formatting, you just need to kick back and relax. You just gotta wait for it to finish, unfortunately. So, I'm gonna speed up the process until we are at some more user input that is necessary, and we'll pick it up from there. Okay, so what it's going to do is just perform this little routine check. Excuse me, we're just going to push enter to continue. It is going to run through this scan disk setup, check the free space, and now it's going to boot in to the actual setup of the device now that it has configured our drive. So we're just going to hit enter or continue here. It's going to start by doing its lovely little Windows 98 setup. It's going to ask us for a little bit of information here next with where we want to install Windows. We are going to leave that default as C Windows and say next, or just click enter. Next, it's going to see what all we have there. It's not going to find anything. It's going to check the available disk space, make sure there's enough. Now we are going to want to leave this default and just say typical here. Oops, I'm not clicked into the machine. There we go. Now, one thing I should mention though is we ran that command earlier on for the mouse over. That still does not work when we're doing the setup. That works after the setup. So if you're noticing that right now, you do still have to push right control in order to get out of here if you're doing something else behind the scenes while you're doing this. But we're just going to leave this in typical and say next. We are going to install most common components, yes, and say next. Computer name, I'm not going to bother changing because it doesn't really matter. We're going to say next. This is the United States that we are in, so we're going to say yes, next, and it's going to start copying the files now. So, while this is copying, once again, please sit back and relax while Windows 98 installs on your computer. During this automated installation process, you'll learn about some of the new features on Windows, and I don't read fast enough to read the rest of that, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward the video, and I will see you in just a moment. Now that we have done the initial reboot here, the time has come to insert our first bit of user information. Like, that's super exciting. Just type in your name here and say next. We do want to agree to the EULA and the terms and conditions. Next, we need to enter our product key. So click your right control button off your keyboard. And we need to, and the Windows keys are all stored in the Windows keys text file in that download that we have earlier. This key and the image itself, oops, that's not right, was provided by, what is that website? WinWorld, I believe is the website. It's a very nice little website. It has tons of old archived images, boot disks, all kinds of stuff for archival and educational purposes. EG7H33GXP. Okay, now we're going to say next. And we are going to say finish. Now, what this does, it finishes the hardware installation and setup that it automatically detects from your computer. There are quite a few steps to this. There's, oh, what is it? The time zone and all the other personal user settings are also done at the end of this. Set finalization settings for setting up the hardware. Now, on my PC, which I'm not sure if we will see here or not, I sometimes get errors during this process. It won't copy some files into my C Windows directory. For some reason, honestly, I don't know why. However, they're not critical files for what we're doing, for what the original intent of this is to do, which for me is to game on, to install my classic games and play them again. So, it doesn't matter when I get these errors. You may or may not get them. I don't get them every time I install this. Now, I've done this install over a dozen times now, trying to perfect this process for this video. So, if my hardware setup detects errors, and while it's copying over the files into C Windows, I will make sure that I come back off of our fast forward and discuss a little bit of that. I am going to just click this restart button now while we're still talking. But what I'm going to do now is fast forward until it requires me to do something else, until the machine needs my input. So I will talk to you then. Okay, so we're already on my input. It wants me to do the time zone. I personally don't really care what it is. You guys can feel free to click and choose where you're at. I will just go ahead and pick Eastern Time, as I am on the East Coast of the United States, and say okay to that. Now it's going to start building the control panel setup. It's going to start injecting the programs and the start menu items. Then it's going to jump down to the Windows Help, followed by the MS-DOS program settings, the application, and now the system configuration settings. Now this system configuration is what I was talking about slightly earlier, where I personally get errors on. I don't know why I get errors. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't, and they're not always the same file. However, when I do get the errors, it is always the same few files. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. If I don't get any errors here, that's great. If I do, it's not going to affect what we're trying to accomplish by this. Right here, we've got this DLL registered service, some type of OCX file. I'm not entirely sure what that is. I've seen those type of files before. Maybe it's just me right now, but I'm not recalling what they're for. If you do get these errors, this is also for Windows Update, as you notice here. So we can just say okay to that, and it's not gonna affect us at all. It's not going to be a problem later while we're doing software installs. It's not going to be a problem when we're doing the display and sound adapters, and it's not going to be a problem when we're doing the game installs, the DirectX and the auto update features that come later in these processes. So I am going to go back to fast forwarding now until we are at the actual login screen. If you notice pop-ups here, assume they're errors, and I am just going to be clicking through them. I'm just going to be clicking OK, like right here. Oh, well, I'm going to say close here, actually. This program has performed an illegal operation and will shut down. Okay, close, close. Like I said, I'm just going to be clicking through them, closing the errors, making the boxes go away. All these are, unfortunately, they happen to me. Now, as I stated a little bit earlier, I've done these installs with a couple of my personal friends as well, around where I live. One was my brother-in-law. I helped him do this. He didn't get any errors. One of my other friends did get the errors. So I don't know what causes it. The only thing I can assume is that it's a difference in hardware possibly, or even maybe what base operating system we're using. I'm just going to go ahead and say restart now while I'm talking again. And I guess probably forget about the fast forward, because I think I'm going to come up to the login screen now, actually. So let's just wait for this splash screen to go away. There it goes. And I believe it's going to pop me into login. It looks like it is. Yes! So, here is the login screen to Windows 98. We're going to say OK, and we're going to listen to the sweet sound of login. Well, after this newfound hardware update here. New hardware found, and the rest of these system updates. Here it comes. There it is. That's what we've been wanting to hear. That was it. That was the beautiful login, and the welcome to Windows 98 screen has come up. Let's just let this play through. Oh man, doesn't that just take you back? Alright, first thing I'm going to do is uncheck that so that doesn't happen again. And after that, what we're going to do, we're going to shut down the VM. We're going to hit start and shut down. Shut it down completely. Bringing us back to our VirtualBox manager. And as you can see, this is powered off. Now, I recommend very strongly, as one, things can break during this process. There can always be a problem. So I always recommend cloning the virtual machine in order with these steps. So by the end of this, you should have 5 or 6 clones of this. Now when we're actually done, you can go back and delete all these other clones, as you probably won't need them anymore. But I do recommend cloning as we go, just in case there is an issue. We are going to do that by just right-clicking and clicking on the clone button. Now, I personally do not call it clone, I call it underscore, and then I call it whatever step I just finished. So I'm going to call this Windows 98 image. Oops, I meant to not put a space there. Windows 98 image, and I say next. And I do a full clone of this and say clone. And there it is. Now, we will continue to use the Windows 98 SE entitled Virtual Machine, and that is what we are going to reopen now and continue into step 3. So I'm going to power this on. While this is powering on, we're going to flash up our next step, and I will talk to you after that. Alright, so now that we have rebooted the machine, we are ready to do the software installs. So, we go to Device, Optical Drive, choose a disk image, and the image that we're going to use, once again, that was downloaded from the download down in the description, there is a link to it. We want to use the Autopatch.exe. So we click that, select it, hit open, we force the unmount, and that unmounts our Windows 98 base image ISO. And we need to double click my computer, double click the Autopatch D, as this is now the CD, the ISO image is obviously copied to CD. And we need to run the April 2007 program, Autopatch program. So we're going to say next, and next, and next, and next, and install. And while this is installing, I'm going to go ahead and give a little bit of kind of insight into this program and why we're installing it. This program has a couple key pieces of software on it. It actually has a ton of software on it, and if you watch these components go across here, you'll see just how many there are. It's going to be doing hot fixes. Right now it's exporting DirectX files. It's going to have updates, it's going to have security updates, it's going to have base operating system updates. It basically has almost everything that you need to update your system to the latest that Windows 98 was. Now, for us, and in this tutorial, we're not going to be installing a lot of things on here. And I'm going to go ahead and click back here real quick, and if you notice, there is actually an updated version as well, April 2008 update. Now, we're not going to be installing this in this tutorial. However, if you do decide to install more than what's here, I would also install those updates as well, because there were more updates. He enhanced a little bit of things, got the latest versions of stuff, the guy that wrote these two programs. And that was the purpose of this. This one is from 2007, I believe, and this is the 2008 updated version. And again, for the purpose of this, we're only using the 2007. The 2008 is just placed there because we could put it onto the ISO image. And then if for any one reason anyone watching this video or in the future can use that file to install other system hotfixes and upgrades as well. Now, because we're not going to be doing that, all we're doing is getting this image to work. We want the 255, I think, bits of color. We want an increased resolution. We want DirectX. We want other kind of system software files such as 7-zip and Adobe. There's some Java, and this program helps start to pave the way for that. We're going to go ahead and launch it now, by clicking Finish. And what we're going to do, we are going to bring this Autopatch Explorer folder to the front and actually close out of it. For some reason, this thing is really taking its time to start up here. My whole machine's acting a little sluggish here, actually. Might be a good idea for me to reboot. So I'm going to go ahead and close this program, actually, and we are going to reboot the machine. Luckily, Windows 98 does not take much time to reboot, especially in this virtual environment. I'm also running a solid-state drive, helps out quite a bit. We've got a good chunk of memory on this device as well. Okay, so now that we've rebooted, let's try and run that again. Let's go to Programs and Autopatcher and launch the Autopatcher. As soon as that hourglass icon disappears here, it's doing something. I know back in the day you wanted to let your operating systems finish whatever they were doing before you tried to run things. There we go, that reboot certainly helped out. And the reason I did not cut that out of there is so that you can see that. You can see kind of the troubleshooting that I'm doing, which is mostly when you run into an issue, try and reboot. This is actually the second time I have done this. I know it's the first time you guys are seeing it, but I ran into so many errors when this Autopatch program ran, I had to restart. So hopefully this time it's going to work. But again, that's why we do those clones. All I did was build another clone, and if you take notice over here where my mouse is now, I cloned the clone, excuse me, and just put it back to the original name, turned it on, and here we were. So, the steps to doing this, we need to push the M key to do the select the modules to install. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We do not want to install most of these. We do not, and I'm sorry, to get these to flip, we just push the corresponding number, as in right here, to turn them off. So I'm going to push 1 on my keyboard now. And as you can see, the system stability updates are set to bypass. We're also going to push 2 for the recommended tweaks, 3 for the essentials, 4 for the data, 5 for the internet, 6 for media player, and 8 for critical updates. So the only thing we're actually installing is DX9 from this menu. Now we need to push the N key, as you can see down here, to go to the next menu screen. We're also going to be removing most of this. We're going to push 1 to remove the critical updates. We're going to push 2 to the other recommended updates. We are going to push 6 for the optional components, and we are going to push 8 for the unofficial Explorer updates. So from this screen, all we're installing are the essential third-party updates and the Visual Basic runtimes. Now we need to push the I key on the keyboard to get to this menu, which is the installation menu, and we're going to push I again to actually begin installing these modules. Now this program is pretty sweet. I actually don't know much about how old these old programs were written. It seems to be some type of like auto script file, but basically what it's doing, it's going to run through these installs that I've selected, and when it needs to reboot, it's going to reboot. and when we log back into the system, you can see it's rebooting right now. Let's see, what is this telling me? You must quit this program before you quit Windows. Click OK to quit the program. Okay. Well, that was weird. I don't recall actually seeing that one before. It seemed to be that the reboot attempted to almost kick off before it was done running its closing command. Which I could see that giving it a problem. Sometimes that happens to me in today's computing world. Seems like it. Oh, nope, it wasn't stuck. I actually legitimately thought it was stuck there. And all I was going to do is do file close and just open it back up. Because the program hit the point where it wanted to reboot, it was going to pick back up where it left off. Which was what I was going to say earlier. I'm going to hit enter to log in here. You do kind of have to hold its hand through this process because you do have to log in. I cannot find the specific file. We're going to say OK, 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 OK. Oh my goodness. We are having lots of pop-ups and errors here. We're just going to keep clicking through them. We're going to push F on that screen to click through that. I am not sure what these DLLs are giving me issue on. Like I said, I just click through these errors. Stuff eventually just installs for me and works. Flash is done. 7-zip is done. Power menu shell extensions are done. Java is now done. We're installing Shockwave Player now. That's done. And these programs, they seem to be working, which after this next reboot here, we'll open it up and verify that all this stuff is there. Obviously, some of the old school games that we're obviously doing this for will require DirectX. That was what was giving us those errors. I'm going to push F to skip this waiting menu. So it's checking to make sure the stuff is there. It's actually just doing that for us. So there we go. All those things are done and good to go. Now it's going to do the visual basic runtimes, which is your C++, that type of program being installed. That's already done. Here we go. Another reboot. It's going quite quick now. Very nice how quickly this is moving for us now. Enter to log in. And I'm going to push F. Going to verify that the product was installed. So there we have it. We've got the it appears to be some type of unofficial update, but whatever, we're fine with that. So what we can do now is push skip, because we actually don't want the unofficial update on the chance that might break something for us later. I recommend only taking the official things. So now it's saying, hey, I'm all done, we're good to go. Took 3 minutes and 30 seconds, which is pretty good. So you can push any key to exit the program, or you can push Control-C to exit without opening the log and debug menu. I always push Control-C because I don't really care about the log and debug menu. Alright, and that takes care of the Autopatch instance of this step. The next step, depending on what you're doing, you could go in here, depending on what you selected, and install the 2008 update. The menu options are identical. The only difference is there are some updated applications and programs in here that are not in this one. So, depending on what you have done, you may want to run this program, install it, and pick the next updates. We're not going to do that because for the purpose of installing games and getting the resolution size bigger, fixing the color depth, we don't need to do that. So I'm going to close out of this. We're going to go to Device and Optical Drive and choose the disk image. Now we are going to pick the DirectX 9 ISO. We are going to reinstall DirectX, and I have a lot of reasons for doing that. Mainly, the DirectX from the Autopatch. I don't know why isn't... Oh, there it updated. So now we will come over and open up my computer and double click the Windows 98 _ DirectX D:, to open that ISO image up. And we will double click this to begin the extraction. We'll just say yes. It wants a temporary place that these files will be extracted, so we need to browse out. it is going to default to C Windows Temp, as you can see down here. I'm personally fine with that. I'll click OK and click OK again. Now, as I was saying, I always do the reinstall of this. One time, only one time, I've had it give me a problem from the auto patcher that it just wouldn't work. So I always just rerun all of DirectX. It makes me feel better and more comfortable that the install is there and functioning properly. Now, that extracted. Again, back in the day, when things extracted, they didn't automatically run. So we have to navigate to that drive. So I clicked from this menu where we were in the Explorer, the up arrow, and I'm going to double click the C drive, double click the Windows directory, get the lovely little warning that says, hey, don't mess with stuff in here. So we are going to click the show files button. We're going to type in the word temp and push enter. That will open our temp directory up. The only thing that is in this directory is the DirectX setup executable, the log, and all the affiliated directories that are exported from DirectX is auto, like that packaged installer that we just mounted and ran. So let's just double click the DX setup.exe, click accept to the agreement, click next, click next. We're gonna let it install its components, which don't take very long. The DX is a very quick install, very fast, which makes things very nice, because we like fast. And we're done. So we're gonna hit finish here, and it's gonna want to reboot, which it immediately did. So I was expecting a prompt, didn't get one, that's okay. Just wait for the login screen. Okay, sorry about that. I did a couple misclicks and started talking about the way wrong thing, so I just decided we'll just cut that part out and we'll pick back up. The only thing that's happened here is the PC's rebooted. We didn't get any errors, so it ran through the sysconfig, which you guys saw. No errors came up. We're good to go with DirectX now. Now what we need to do is go to our next step, which is the display doctor. We are going to fix the resolution and increase the color depth to the virtual machine. I will see you guys in just a moment. Alright, so one thing that I did completely forget to do at the end of the last step was to clone the machine. We are going to shut this down before we do anything else and make another clone of this device. Once this actually flips off, there we go, we're going to clone. We're going to back up and call this Auto Updater. Say next, full clone of course. That'll pop up down here at the bottom. We'll turn this back on and get to display doctor now. At the speed that this boots up, it's so wonderful. I'm very pleased with the end result of installing Windows 98 virtually. Like, I had never expected it to turn out as well as it does when we're done here. So, in order to do the display doctor, we're going to hit device and go to optical drives, choose a disk image, and we're going to pick our final ISO called display doctor. We're going to open that up. We are going to say force on mount, come into my computer, and double click the Win98 display dock. We are going to run the SDD-Win7 beta of Display Doctor. As you can see here, the registration info for Display Doctor is also in here. We are just going to accept the defaults, click next, check the box that says we accept the terms, continue to click next, and start the installation. This installation is also really fast, and when it is completed, it is going to want to be rebooted. We are going to restart the computer now and click finish. We're going to push enter to log in. And we are going to double click that text file. And there we get the, oh, it's 256. I think I've been saying 255 this whole time. What is wrong with me? We do get this error every time that, at least I do, every single time that you first reboot after installing Display Doctor, you get this error. Just say OK here. Keep saying OK until it goes away. Now, Display Doctor opened in the background. We are going to double click the blue bar up here. Get it to come up full screen. Scroll down and scroll over. We're going to select the Register Now bubble radio button and click Next. The name is CSC Night, and the registration code, I'm just going to go ahead and close these windows and do the entire walkthrough. The registration code for Display Doctor is in the ISO. So we open up my computer, double click the Win98 display dock, and double click registration. I just copy and paste the serial number right out of here. Do a copy, come back to Display Doctor, and do a paste, and say registered. This product is registered to CSC Night. We will reboot now, and say yes. And we reboot once again. Say OK, or just push enter. Now we will close this window. Display Doctor will automatically open every time the first time. So let's double click that blue bar again. As you can see, the driver is currently disabled for SciTech and the monitor model is not selected. The first thing that I personally do is select the monitor. But before we do that, one key thing to note is right here we can tell that DirectX is installed and working because GL Direct is enabled. That is always disabled if you do not have DirectX installed. This Display Doctor is also pretty reliant on DirectX as well. So that's just a side note. If you were concerned with your DirectX install, if this says enabled, it's definitely going to be fine. So let's go ahead and select our monitor model now. By clicking the monitor not selected text, it will open it up. I always just leave it standard monitor types, and I just pick Super VGA 16 by 12. We will scroll over to the right and click apply. We'll scroll back over and we will push home. Now, as you can see, our monitor is now selected. So now we need to actually do the display driver. So we're going to replace the out-of-date driver technology, as it says right here, by clicking this disabled text. We will then select the SciTech Nucleus Driver Radio button, scroll slightly to the right, and click Apply. It will want you to reboot your computer, to which you should say yes. Reboot that thing. Now, an important thing to note here. If you did not run the second command from the very beginning of the virtual machine setup, I'm just going to go ahead and click OK while I'm talking, you will blue screen here and your machine will be crashed and it will burn. You will have to restore back to one of our other clones that we did, and you will need to run that command, because if you didn't, if you're on an AMD processor, this Display Doctor will not work. I don't know why, but that is what fixed this for me. So if you didn't run that command, if you're blue screening here right now, you should go down in the description, because all those processor types I have mapped out there, you should be able to figure out what you need to modify in that command string that is also down in the description for a different processor type, and continue to try that. One of those should work. If that still doesn't work, you're gonna have to do something proactively. You're gonna have to go out to Google, try and find something else that you can use to fix this. But this is what has fixed it for me. it should also fix it for you. So we're going to double click the display doctor bar again, just so that we can minimize it much easier. Now we should be ready to do the resolution. So let's click on properties after we right click the desktop background. Click on appearance. Nope. Click on settings. Yes, we click on settings. Now we should be able to slide this bar up. I can slide the bar up, which is great. We've got 256 color, and we've got 1020 by 768. We will click apply and reboot again. Windows is now restarting. Now, sometimes this gets stuck here for me. I don't know why. I typically give it a couple minutes. If it doesn't restart by itself, I do file close and kill the machine, like this. But sometimes it just works. I'm gonna give it just another little bit of time here. We'll see what it's gonna do. Let's just sit back and enjoy a little bit of the music that's going in the background here, right? Let's just enjoy that for a moment. Well, much like you, I'm tired of waiting, so I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. And make sure to select the power off the machine radio button. Click OK. Now we're going to power her back on. And we will see if our window expands. It should expand just fine. Now, because we did that, it's trying to launch us into safe mode, which it will do normally. As you can see right here, we've got an enter choice and we've got a time remaining. You can either push the 1 button or you can hit the up arrow twice. I just always hit the up arrow twice to go to normal. It's the way that I do it, and push enter. Then it will boot up normally, and our resolution should be increased. As you can tell, it is now increased. We'll push enter. Everything actually moves a little bit smoother too. I'm sure you notice that the mouse is kind of choppy in here. It's gonna be like that. Display doctor automatically opens. You see what our monitor type is. Now we are still capped out at that resolution. So if I right click, go to properties and settings again, we can go up to that. However, I do believe that causes a reboot again. I'm going to turn it up to 1280 by 1024. Just for the purpose of this test, I'm going to see what it does. And we're going to try and do it without restarting. Resize your desktop. Okay. Oh, what do you know? That worked perfectly fine. Oops. Let's just say no to that though, because my monitor, as you can tell, isn't quite big enough for that. Now I have this all resized. Let's fix this window here. That's good enough. So, as you can tell, our resolution is increased. Our colors are up, which is the main thing that you are most likely having problems with, because that's the only thing that I could, well, one of the only things that I really just could not get to work was increasing these colors. Display Doctor fixes that. Using all the steps that we've done up until this point should really get your machine to a stable point as well, and make it so you can install whatever you're trying to install on Windows 98. For myself, it's games, of course. So we're going to say OK here, close that out. As you can see, the SciTech display driver is now enabled, the GL is enabled, the stereo support and the optimized mode I just leave disabled because it doesn't really matter to me. So we're going to minimize this, and now we're going to move on to our next step, which I believe is enabling sound. Now, you might think that's a little weird, but we'll talk about that in the next step. See you then. Alright, so before I get into the sound that we just flashed up, I just want to draw your attention over here to the left. I had forgotten to clone the device after Display Doctor, so I shut the machine down, I went out here and cloned it, and booted back up. That was all that I did. I do highly recommend cloning after Display Doctor as well, because Display Doctor is beta software. It's honestly not super reliable, but it is one of the only two things that I think will even work. So we got that clone there just in case something bad happens. We can revert back to a point when Display Doctor was working, and this way, if you really feel like it, you can get in here and mess with all these settings in here. I don't mess with them because it works as is. Anyway, let's go ahead and continue onto our sound. So in order to enable sound, which sounds weird because we do have sound. We hear the boot noises, we hear Windows noises if there are errors. The only problem with that is when you load up games, they don't have sound on them when you follow this particular tutorial and walkthrough. At least mine didn't. Mine never did. So I recommend doing these settings regardless because that way it can work. Now, what we do for that, we hit the Start menu button. We come up to Settings and open up Control Panel. Next, we're going to, I personally just like to expand this because it's a little bit easier. We're going to double click the Multimedia tool. We are going to, in Audio, which we're already in, we're in the under the Playback section, we are going to go to Advanced Properties. Next, we click the Performance tab, and we turn the hardware acceleration from full all the way down to none, and click Apply. That's it. That gets it to work. Now, if you want to test this out, there is a way to test this. We're going to close all these, and I am actually going to show you how to test that right now. If you go to the Start menu and open up the Run box, type in the following: DirectX. Oops, there's the other E. And that is for DirectX Diagnostics tool. We will say yes to that pop-up. It just does a little bit of checking here. Now, what we want to do is come up to our tabs. We want to click the Sound tab. And now we want to do the Test DirectX Sound. So let me get my headphones on here quick. There we go. As you can see, our hardware acceleration is at no acceleration. So I'm going to test that out at where it should be working, and we will see what that sounds like and does. This will test direct sound on the device by playing a sound effect using several different audio formats. Click OK to proceed. OK to proceed. We're going to say yes. I heard that, so I'm going to say yes. Yes. This is really all this is just clicking through yeses and telling it when you hear and don't hear sound. Yes. 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 A yes. Your sound card does not support hardware buffering. Sounds will only play back from software buffers, which, although that does stink, works. So we're going to say yes to that. Now, here is what it does if you have it even turned up to basic, standard, or full. I'm just going to run it on basic just to show you guys what happens. This will not affect the settings. This is strictly for testing. So our multimedia setting that we changed earlier is still set to none. Just so you guys know. And this is also just for a test so you know why we need to do this. So let's click that Test Direct Sound button and say yes. And we didn't hear anything. Did you hear that sound? No. Test fails. Because the sound isn't intelligent enough from a Windows 98 virtual machine to pull anything to accelerate it. So we have to say no, and we have to rely on the system software to produce all the sound for us. So let's exit out of this, and you are now good to go. However, there is still one more optional step that I am going to discuss. We're going to flash that up on the screen here, then we'll talk about it. But before we do that, everything is ready at this point. There is no reason, if you follow this step by step, that you should not be able to install any Windows 98 game that ever existed on this box. Now, with that being said, there are some things that you can't do. Some Windows 95 games were never built into Windows 98. Some 2000 and XP games also do not work on Windows 98. But if the game was built and it says it supports Windows 98, you should be able to use it. It's the same with any software. If you're using this for any other reason, although honestly I don't know why you would want to do that. There might be a reason. If there is, feel free to comment as to why, because I would actually be really interested to know what else you could be using this for. But yeah, I'm gonna flash up our optional steps here and talk to you when that screen disappears. Alright, so the optional steps to this system. Let's discuss that slightly. The first thing we're actually gonna do is we're gonna open it up. We're gonna go to Start, Settings, Control Panel. We're gonna open up the network settings. And right here, this little adapter right here, the TCP, IP, AMD, PCNet, mainly adapter, PCI, ISA. What this adapter does is enable your networking. Let me show you what I mean by that. If we hit Start Run, type in command, we can type in ipconfig. And as you can see, we have an IP address here. Now, if I delete this, we won't have an IP address. And for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to do that. What I recommend before you do it is clone your virtual machine now and make this copy have two copies of your Windows 98 virtual machine, one that has this adapter and one that doesn't. The only reason to delete this adapter is that it will then allow auto logins. Let me go ahead and remove it and show you why. I'm going to remove it and say OK. It's going to tell me it needs to reboot, and I'm going to say OK to that as well. Now, I did clone it. I did clone my virtual machine before I did this because I personally keep that network adapter. However, if you're going to be the only one using this and you don't want it on the network, which you might not want it on there anyway, feel free to go in and delete that adapter. The reason that I keep that adapter is because when my friends and I get together, we actually have a plan to attempt to do LAN games through the 98 virtual machine, which is why I'm not going to delete it on my final copy. But as you can see, that automatically logged us in. It didn't open up and prompt us for a username and password. And that is because that adapter, if you remember, our login said enter your network login and password. Well, without the network adapter, it doesn't care anymore. So that makes it so you can reboot your PC and it'll just log in. You'll just open it right up. You can just double click your Win98 and it'll open up. It may seem like kind of a silly thing to talk about, but it is really convenient and it saves you a little bit of time. It saves you a little click here and there, which over the course of however long you're going to be doing this might save you quite a bit of time. Just something to have there, something to think about, a little bit of a bonus thing to discuss. But yeah, that's really the only optional step that I have. Everything else is pretty important to follow step by step and do exactly as is outlined in order to get this virtual environment to work properly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and cut the video off here, and I'm going to do a little bit of a jump cut and do an outro. If you're interested in hearing it, feel free to continue watching. If you're done, I totally understand. and I'll talk to you later. Alright, well, that does it for this tutorial and this demonstration. I really appreciate the time. I appreciate your view. Thank you very much. Feel free to leave any feedback down in the comment section. If you're having issues with the virtual machine, if you have a problem with one of the steps, please leave a comment and I will try to get to it. If for some reason the links in the descriptions break, please comment that as well, and I will try and get them out somewhere and update the description as soon as I can after reading your comments about it. If you like this video, please give me a like. It would mean a lot. If you want to see more videos like this or any other technical style tutorial videos, please leave that in the comments as well. I'm a fairly tech savvy person. I work on computers. It's what I do. I used to be a desktop technician and a desktop engineer. Right now I'm a programmer analyst, so I write a lot of JavaScript right now, and I work with a product called Highland OnBase every day. I really like it. I enjoy doing these type of videos. One thing is, as some of you might know, this is primarily a gaming channel. My very little tiny corner of YouTube that I have. If you're interested in seeing some of my gameplay, please feel free to explore my channel. If you want to sub, go ahead. If you don't, if you just came here to see this, either way, I appreciate the time in taking in... Wow, I didn't make that sentence flow well, did I? I appreciate you taking the time to view this video and even listen to this part. Thank you very much. I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.